In 1939 to 1940, the building housed the Consulate of Japan. Consul Sugihara, savior of Jews, held his office here, in this house. And along this, it wasn't paved like this, but here where all the Bochum from the Mir Yeshiva and Polish refugees lined up for Sugihara to handwrite the transit visas.
He came from samurai stock. That means that they were at the very top echelon of Japanese society. His father wanted him to become a doctor, but he was a tall, beautiful man, and very strong-willed inside. But the Japanese don't come out, and they're not open and direct about things. It was all kept inside. And his father said to him, "You're going to become a doctor." So he went in to write the entrance exam. He sat behind the desk because his father had said, "You're going to write this exam." He didn't lift his pen. He waited for the 2 hours or however long it was going to be, and he walked out. He got 0, and he never went to medical school. Instead, he joined the Foreign Service, and he was sent to Russia, where he learned Russian. Just have a look here on the right-hand side. If you can just give me 2 minutes, I just want to give a quick introduction. Even 5 minutes. There used to be a wall in front over here, which I've got photographs of, that's now been taken away now that it's a museum, just here along the pavement. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. He then joined the Foreign Service, was sent to Russia, and because he had learned Russian, the Japanese, who in fact were allies of the Nazis, sent Sugihara to Kovna, to Kaunas. And this is where they sent him. This is the very building in which he and his wife Yukiko and their family lived in Kovna, and they also ran the consulate from this place. Why did the Japanese send a consul to Kovna, to Lithuania? Because as we know in politics, there's always everybody spying on everybody else. Even though he's your friend, you still want to have information about what he's doing. And the Japanese were concerned about what the Nazis were doing in Europe and where they were moving. And he was sent here to look at movements of German troops. This plan. The plan was that if you could get an entrance visa, or if you could show that you could go into another country in the world, no, we're coming to transit visas in a minute. If you could go to a place in the world which would accept you, then they said to Sugihara, "Could you give us a transit visa so that we're not going to go to Japan. We will go to Japan in transit to somewhere else." And these boys, how they found it, I don't know, but they found that Curacao, near the United States, you only needed the consent of the governor, but you didn't need any documentation. So they said, the guys talking the yeshiva. But it's just one of those amazing things in history. So they said to him like this. They said, "We haven't got any paperwork from the governor, but you don't need paperwork for Curacao. All we're asking you to do is to give us a transit visa to go to Japan." He cabled Japan 3 times. And I went to meet with the Japanese ambassador in Pretoria. About a year ago, I did a function with the Japanese embassy and the Jewish community, where we celebrated the life of Chiune Sugihara, and we lit candles. And I called on 3 Rabbonim in the community to come forward who had been saved, whose families had been saved. All of them were Americans, and they'd been saved. Rabbi Goldman from Sydenham Shul, Rabbi Levi Weinberg from Chabad, and another Rav from Johannesburg. His name's not coming to at the moment. His wife, her father, was a man by the name of Shmuel Orlansky, and I have a photocopy of the original transit visa that was signed by Sugihara in our home in Johannesburg. You know that I'll make a copy of it and I can send it to you. He cabled Japan 3 times, and I saw the cables. the ambassador showed me the documentation in the embassy. They never replied. And he decided with his wife that we're going to go ahead and we're going to issue the transit visas. They wrote out in all 6,000 visas, and many of them were multiple visas. In other words, it would allow a family to go with two. Remember we said earlier, like the passports, that will be a mother with 3 kids, or whatever it was. And within a period of, I think it was about 6 weeks, they wrote out day and night. They did not sleep. The men of the Mira Yeshiva were standing, can you see the road up ahead of you? They were standing in a long line over here, right outside, on the pavement, on the sidewalk that you see over here. They were standing here and nobody made a noise. They all were completely quiet, and I've got photographs of them with their suits, with their hats, and they were just standing quietly. They didn't make a nuisance of themselves, and he just looked out the window, and he said to his wife, these people have committed no crime. I am not going to wait for the Japanese government to tell me what to do. Let's start working. And by hand, not with typewriters because there wasn't time to type, by hand they started writing them out day and night. And ironically, they had a German guy that was a secretary for them that was working here, and he too was signing the visas, and he said, I hope that one day you'll remember me for what I've done, that I was a German that signed the visas. They never found him after the war. We don't know what happened, if he got killed in the war, whatever it was. Today, ladies and gentlemen, there are 40,000 Jews in the world because of those 6,000 passports. I went to Japan, I went to Yaatsu, which is the town in which Sugihara was born, and today he's become a celebrated figure in Japan. He died an absolute pauper. He was fired from the foreign service, but the Japanese, because they're so tznius, they didn't say you're fired, they simply said nothing. And he applied for a job and there was nothing that was forthcoming. His family became destitute. He eventually said, well, look, the only thing I can do is I can speak Russian. So he went to work for a Russian company in Moscow, and he was absolutely impoverished. He used to send back a few rubles every month to support his family. And once, I've got it on video, his son came to visit him, and he had a little primer stove which he cooked a piece of sausage and 1 potato in his bathroom toilet, because he didn't have a kitchen, for him and his son to have a piece of potato and a sausage, because that was the most expensive and the most beautiful food that he could buy for his son. 2 or 3 years before he was nifter, Zechrona Tzadik Kodesh Livrocha, and a man that was saved by him in the war traced him, and he went to Japan because he was talking to survivors, and they said, what happened to Sugihara? We've got to find the man. So he went into Japan, and Sugihara changed his name to Sugiwara, because he was so embarrassed that his name was Sugihara and that he thought it would only cause problems for the family. And that's why he battled to find him. He found him, I think it was 2 or 3 years before he died, and he said, please, Mr. Sugihara, he said, we need to thank you. I need to thank you for 40,000 people in the world today. And he said, do what is right because it is right, and leave it alone. I didn't do this for reward. I don't want anything. So they said to him, so the man said to him, please, he implored on him, he said, please, you've got to give us an opportunity to pay back. He said, I'll tell you what, he said, I have one son that I haven't been able to educate. He wants to become an engineer. Can you take him to Israel? And they brought him to Israel, and he studied at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and for 4 years he was supported by the survivors of Sugihara, and he became an engineer.
What year was that?
I can't remember exactly the year. They then brought out, he was nifter, they brought out his wife and daughter and some of the grandchildren, and they brought them to the Mira Yeshiva, because the whole Mira Yeshiva was saved. It was the only yeshiva in the whole of Europe that was saved intact. The whole Mira Yeshiva was saved by this man over here, in addition to a whole lot of other Polish refugees that had come over the border into Kovna. When they got to Kovna, they said, we didn't believe that there was such a Jewish community on earth. The Polish Jews didn't understand. They said, what kind of, you remember we were talking about Slobodka, that kind of the personality you were developing here, the royalty that you were talking about? When they got to Kovna, they said, we never thought that such Jews existed in the world. And they went across to Kobe in Japan, they went to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai they went to Eretz Yisrael. So they took the wife and the children and the grandchildren to the Mira Yeshiva. I have documented, I have the footage.
Mira Yeshiva in Israel.
In Mira Yeshiva in Israel, I have it documented. One of the Rosh Yeshiva with a white beard and a hat and a white shirt and a suit was bending over her with tears running down his face. He said, Mrs. Sugihara, I'm not only thanking you for saving my life, I'm thanking you on behalf of my late mother for giving all of us an opportunity to raise our families in America. And there are 40,000 people that I'm thanking you for today. Bless you, Mrs. Sugihara. And she started crying, and her granddaughters started crying, and her daughter. And they paid tribute to her. And the late Sugihara, may his memory be a blessing, is the man that was over here. He passed away, and he's the only Japanese man on earth that was ever called one of the righteous Gentiles. Chasida Umata Oile. So that's what we're doing here today, ladies and gentlemen, just to remember Sugihara, Chiune, and Yukiko Sugihara.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, I'm not going to be as eloquent as Hugh, because nobody can be, but I just want to pick up that story and say that one of the very last visas, truly the last visas, was issued to my mother's cousin, and a man who's still alive today, Mr. Benny Fischoff in New York, who's a very dear friend, and all of his children, came back, and he was one of the Polish ones who managed to have one of the last visas, and the other one was Lazar Hendelis from Los Angeles, who married. So these two young boys came into Shanghai as refugees, and the refugees were taken in by the Sephardic community, which was very great and very affluent and established in Shanghai. My mother, our mother, my mother, God bless her, was born and raised in Shanghai, and recalls that the refugees were all invited for Shabbos. They were the yeshiva boys that came for just sustenance and assistance, and they had like all the organizations that just helped to establish these people. And until the British passports, which was my mother's family, were taken into the ghettos over there, and they were interned. So actually, the Mir Yeshiva and all of the refugees that came to Shanghai did better off than the locals, after all. But in any case, there was a meeting at one of these Shabbos Yantif tables between one of those Bachrim and my mother's first cousins, and they married. So that was also a very unheard of situation until that point, where Sephardic married Ashkenaz, and that was Mazel and Lazar Hendelis, who live in Los Angeles, and that is part of the history.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, I think we must leave the bus now. We can talk. It's getting quite hot over here. Let's get out the bus. We can talk inside the museum. It's a lot cooler.
Hello. No.
They were also in Shanghai.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We have part of these. The Ashkenaz.
We're going to be here for half an hour.
She was born in
Shanghai.
Yeah.
We went back.
The Boimel. Have you heard of the Boimel family?
Yes.
Well, also from.
Yeah. So 1 second. So where are her parents? They were refugees through this man, or
Sugihara diplomats for the Life Foundation. Sugihara.
That's good. Many years.
Alice Rebel, please enter this room. And this room. Okay, you'll be able to identify. Okay, first listen. We have here a local guy, Arvidas, okay, and he will tell you more about Sugihara. Okay.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see you, everyone here. Actually, I was informed that a bit of information you have already gotten in the bus. You have been introduced to everything, and I suppose that you have known something before coming here about Sugihara. Maybe after visiting this museum you will know more. I hope so. From where to start? Maybe from the house itself. This is one thing that is remaining original. The house itself and the flag, Japanese flag. Everything else, alas, is not original. Because after Sugihara finished his work here in 1940, he left, and during the Soviet times, all the furniture, all the appliances were gone. And now that we have here the tables, the chairs, the shelves are donated by other museums, other people, to recreate the spirit. Therefore, we are happy to tell you that you can touch everything, you can sit on chairs, you can enjoy the museum interactively. So, and this room that you are standing here was the original office. Therefore, you can see this table. Actually, what is interesting, although it is not the original one, the design is very much similar. And when you see the photographs, videos, you may see similarities. Of course, we tried to pick the best one, the best looking. And I hope we were quite lucky to have it. And as Sugihara was working here, this was his main room. The other rooms were dedicated to his assistants. He had 2 of them. And the room that we are going to watch a short video was the room for audiences, just to greet the guests and to have meetings. The first floor of the house was the living quarters. His family was had their rooms, and for his kids, for his wife, and for wife's sister. And the second floor, which is right under the floor and under the roof, was rented by 2 Lithuanian scientists. So 1 house, but 3 purposes. Office for the consulate, living quarters for the Japanese family and Lithuanian family. Everything under 1 roof. So, as you see, Kaunas was very multicultural at that time. And the house was built right before Sugihara moved here. In 1938 and in 1939 he came, and he was watching where to stay, where to install the consulate. And the builder, the owner of the house, was looking for someone to rent it because it was too big for him, and he moved to the other city. He was a professor, and therefore he could not live here. So quite a coincidence, but a lucky coincidence. So that's in short about the place that you are staying here. But what is interesting, maybe not everyone is stressing out this moment, that when we talk about Sugihara, we have also talk about Jan Zwartendijk. This Dutch person was a consul of honor in Lithuania for the Netherlands. Although he was not a diplomat per se, he was a businessman. He was a representative of Philips company, but he was empowered by the government to act as a consul. And without his signed visas, called Curaçao visas, the Jews could not go to Sugihara, ask for the transit visas. That is the main thing. Therefore, this kind of tandem of 2 diplomats working for the same purpose. Of course, after getting the final destination Curaçao visa from Jan Zwartendijk, after getting the transit visa from Mr. Sugihara, the refugees also had to get a transit visa from which country? Russia. Correct. And to get that, they had to go to NKVD. They were interrogated. They had to prove that they will not stay in Russia. They will go through there and successfully more or less successfully, they will not stay living in Russia. And this journey through Russia was, of course, not the easiest one. 2 weeks by train, Trans-Siberian Express from Kaunas to Vladivostok, well, that was quite a challenge. Although some say that it wasn't that bad, because having the tickets through Russia, they bought them from the tourist companies. So they were like actually tourists. They quite enjoyed quite a pleasant journey. But that's a theory. Of course, it depends very on the person who traveled.
Did any of them actually go to Curacao?
Actually, that's a very interesting thing, because none of them went to Curacao eventually. After leaving Europe or Eurasia, after going to Japan, they spread everywhere to the world, but not to Curacao. First of all, they stayed in Kobe, in the Japanese city, because in that city there was a Jewish community earlier installed there. But the majority of the refugees were moved to Shanghai, you know, a city in China, but at that time it was the territory of Japan. And Shanghai was a very suitable place to locate these interns. Well, there's another theory that they were not that, the conditions were not that bad. After all, they were not the prisons, for example, prisoners. They were not like camps. They were just a place for refugees. But from Shanghai and from Japan to all the places except Curacao. Okay. We can move to it.
Yes, a long time. What do they do for food on the trip? We were there earlier this year, that's why I asked.
I haven't been to Paris. Amsterdam.
We were there.
Amsterdam, but that's huge.
Schreiber was there in South America.
Abranos Beras Shapira. Carlos Gitas.
She was just talking about it. What did you write?
This whole time.
Do you want to write? Because it's a word right. Later than inspiration. This is what he says.
Thank you.
This is an amazing expression. If you do not, you should use this.
Okay, David, there are 35 chairs, so it's enough for us. I will stand and you will stand over.
זה יהיה בלגן, אפשר כולם להיכנס ואי אפשר לנשום, זה יהיה מזגן, מה אתה? מה,
So, I have my
He's coming in 20 minutes.
This is represent the history not only from the like state's perspective as it was in the other room. The historical context is portrayed in the screens, and here you can see more information about Sugihara as a person, as a family member, as a student, and of course about his wife, Yukiko Sugihara. Well, she visited Kaunas in 2003, and it was of course a big day when on that moment these sakura trees were planted in front of the house. So now every spring these sakuras are blossoming very, very attractively. Like a point of interest in all the Kaunas. So people do come here and make photos and enjoy it. And like small Japanese cultures piece here. And Sugihara as a person, well, it is a very difficult to evaluate him from one perspective, one-sided perspective, because as you all may have known, Japanese culture is very strict. There's a very hierarchy is very, very important. Not obeying to one's parents, it is simply difficult to imagine, not to even to see in a real life situations. But here we have Sugihara. While his parents wanted him to study in medical school, he had a different attitude, and he showed it not attending the exams, entering exams. He just, and at that moment he simply failed them, wasn't unable to enter the university. He wanted to study languages, he wanted to be a teacher. Well, this was not the profession his parents imagined him to have. But he did it on his own, and he went to China in Harbin University. He was very, very good for languages. We should say that he learned Russian quite well, and of course Chinese. And because of Russian proficiency, Russian language proficiency, he was moved as a diplomat later to the Europe, to Europe in Finland, in Lithuania, later in the Königsberg, which is now the oblast Kaliningrad, Russian part, Kaliningrad region. Later he even worked in Bucharest, in Romania, in Czech Republic, for a short while even in Berlin. But as you see, the geography is Europe. And that allowed him to travel a lot, and to see all the actual situation that was during the wartime, before the wartime, and after the wartime. Because he returned to Japan only in 1948, after being kept in intern camp in Moldova. Now it is in Moldova. So 3 years of staying there was quite a devastating moment because his youngest kid died right after coming to Japan because of insufficiency of organism. That was a
Insufficiency of
organism. I mean, he was so weak after
traveling.
of body. Sorry.
Nutrition.
Yeah, and malnutrition, of course.
Sure.
And now, of all the 4 kids that he had, his family had, is the only one surviving, and he is living in Belgium. He has his diamonds business. Sometimes visits Lithuania, and after showing, making the most recent movie about Sugihara, have you heard Persona non grata? Some have heard, some maybe heard for the first time, but this movie was shot in Poland last year and the year before. Last winter it was the global premiere. No, it was a global premiere in Kaunas, 2 months before premiere in Japan. And during winter season, some say, statistics say actually, that Persona non grata was the second most watched movie after James Bond in Japan.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
this does say something actually. And when tourists come here from Japan, of course 90% of them are Japanese, they say that they heard about Sugihara for the first time watching this movie.
Wow.
And they came here only because of watching the movie. Not because they read the articles they saw, they read books or something else. Because there are lots of books in Japanese, articles of course, and other documentaries. But you can see what does the media, what is the influence of media and modern types of information spreading.
So is that son that studied to be an engineer, is he no longer alive, that one? Just the one
Israel.
son
The one that studied in
Israel. The one that studied in Israel to become a...
The youngest one is only alive. Which was studying in Israel, yes, he is.
As an old man or as a...
There were lots of. His all the kids were had particular diseases. Most of them cancer. They were not that old to die because of age.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
I think he died in his 50s.
Oh, shit.
Okay, let's show the...
Yeah, that's in short, but we only say you something more.
1939年9月、ドイツ軍のポーランドに第二次世界大戦の開始である。ポーランド、ナチスドイツによるユダヤ人排斥の嵐が吹き荒れ、杉原一家がリトアニアにやってきたのはそんな時期だったのである。ドイツ軍のポーランド侵攻から1年も経ってない翌年、1940年